Hi, welcome back to More Magic. I am going to talk about Hekate in your birth chart today. And this comes after me reading a really good book. Hekate is a goddess I've been working with for a minute. Those are one of those candles is an altar for her. She is an excellent goddess to work with if you are feeling lost or in need of guidance, right? To find the right path. If you feel like you're at a crossroads. And a good way to do that is to look at your birth chart and see where she lives in your birth chart. It's an asteroid, so we can learn a lot about how you can personally work with her based on where she's at. And I'm going to use my chart as an example with like some ideas. So, first of all, who is Hekate? She is a goddess that was raised in the underworld, but not restricted to the underworld. Very like unique, powerful story. She alludes a lot of the other powers, right? So if we're talking about like Zeus and Olympians, Hades, underworld, she's a power unto herself and is feared by kind of powerful men, right? So that's kind of the first layer of this persona that we're dealing with. Next, the unique journey that she went on helped carve out what she's so like specifically helpful for, right? The crossroads, the lost or misguided, also like stray animals, liminal spaces like that feel in between, which is also a way of saying boundaries, right? Like yes and no, that doesn't work for me, right? So as far as Hekate in your chart, I use Luna software, and that can make it difficult because most of the asteroids look the same, so you may have to click around. Depending on the software that you use, it could look different, but for me it looks like a star, which is all asteroids. So you have to, in Luna, you have to click on it, and then that way you can verify which asteroid you're looking at. And sites like astro.com, I think you would have to enter it in specifically. But for example, right, she lives in my fifth house. My fifth house is Pisces, but fifth house in general is more Leo-esque, right? It is fierce, it is creative, bold. That's what fifth house inherently stands for, right? It's flirtatious, it's dating, sex for fun, children, right? Fifth house is a place where people will get pregnant if they're in that perfection year, or if you have major like placements in the fifth house, you often like to work with children or be around children, right? Because they're like youthful spirit feeds you. In my case, my fifth house is Pisces, and it contains my north node, right, which is kind of my karmic compass in life. It's an optional pathway, which I think is interesting that I have Hekate in that house, right? It's a crossroad. North node essentially is a crossroad because it's not forced on you, right? So things like Saturn in your chart are continual, are maybe even forceful, right? They are felt. North node, you have to kind of opt into, you have to learn about it to know. And what it is there's a south node and a north node. South node represents our past lives, what's familiar, what we've kind of been there, done that. And north node is a direction that we can go in this life that might feel uncomfortable, but will kind of unlock things in our soul that we kind of have to choose the discomfort for the growth. My past lives are in Virgo, so being detail oriented, being grounded, right, being almost surgical is something I've done in past lives. In this life, I'm being asked to kind of float a little, right? I'm being asked to kind of go with the flow in terms of like a Pisces vibe. So I just realized that there's a TV reflection. We've been leaving the TV on for the cats because they like the wild animal shows. It's so cute to see your cat sitting in front of the TV like actively watching. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have it on right now. It would be like potential background noise, but for the cats, anything for the cats. North node, south node are very important. So I love that not just Hekate, I have Kali in here too, which is like rage, love, destruction, sexuality, right? But also kind of a feminine icon in a way because it's like the I guess, stereotype of femininity, right? She is burning rage and destruction, but love and loyalty. So Hekate and Kali, 12 and 14 degrees feels very exciting in my chart, something I like to dig into. And what this tells me is that when I'm being creative, I have most access to what her knowledge would be or what her guidance might be, right? If I'm living in some form of creativity or doing some sort of creative activity, I think that's a beautiful time to try to connect with Hekate specifically because she's in my 5th house. She's next to my north node, so that gives me a sense of something about learning about her is karmic. I use whole sign astrology, and I also use Hellenistic astrology. So when specifically in whole sign, things that are in the same house are considered conjunct, even if they're like very far away. We still consider it kind of this conglomerate of energy, right? And that means all the things in my 5th house I feel like are working together for me, right? If I honor it properly. I think that looking at the house she's in for you is a good first step. Looking at what is around her in your chart, and then going that next step and seeing what is she connected to on other parts of your chart, right? What is she sitting across from? What is she squaring? What is she trining? In my case, she has a trine to my rising, which is my Scorpio rising. I have Pluto there. She is like a positive connection with that. Now, she's also squaring my lot of spirit, right? So that is a more problematic aspect, but that's okay, right? What it means is that when I'm focusing on things that feel creative in nature, bold in nature, 5th house E, Pisces E, then maybe my lot of spirit isn't the priority. Maybe there's some way to connect them. Maybe there's a discomfort, but maybe there's something I can do to help kind of connect that because of that square that's there. When things are opposing, that's a little different. That's more of a direct conversation. Oppositions are actually much less difficult than squares. Squares are kind of the hardest thing that we can have in our chart. And if we have a square, it's a place that with friction that we just have to be aware of, right? That we just have to like knowingly go into and try to find a way to, one, acknowledge it in ourselves, but then two, figure out what the solution is or the best way forward is based on that information. It's not like you throw your hands up and you're like, oh, well, there's a square, nothing I can do. No, it's all information. If you don't know where Hekate is in your chart, wherever you're watching this, you can leave a comment and I would happily look her up. If this is YouTube, I think that's going to be a little harder. If this is TikTok, that's a little easier, right? If this is podcast, Hekate in your chart podcast episode, maybe my email is best for anybody. That would be mary.morexmagic@gmail.com. And I would love to look her up for you. I probably can't help myself but to do a little bit of a reading around it, but I don't want to promise that, right? But the bare minimum that I know I could do is tell you where she's. And to do that, in your birth chart, we need your date of birth, right? The year, the day, the month, We need your time of birth. When were you born? And that's can be a little bit more difficult. I believe we can still look up Hekate without that. And location, where were you born? So those are what I need to be able to look her up in your chart. But I would love to hear where she is and what you're doing to utilize her. She represents, or things that kind of are associated with her would be like keys. There's also like this like sacred animal connection. In most depictions, she ends up befriending Cerberus, the three-headed dog. She's got Hecubus, the queen of Troy, turned into an animal that is like her companion. When I say a dog, like a silver dog. So keys, crossroads. So when you leave offerings first, a lot of people will do it at a literal crossroads somewhere, right? Obviously, like don't litter or be rude, but like this should be very personal, and it should also be very aware, right? But she is a wonderful goddess to work with, and I really do think that she can help us through like lost or confusing places if we give her the opportunity to.